Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Kumiko Ogihara, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all to the first Global Green Transformation Conference 2022, and I'm emceeing this conference. First, let me introduce His Excellency Mr. Shinichi Nakatani, State Minister of Economy, Trade and Industry, for the welcome keynote speech. Mr. Nakatani, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Shinichi Nakatani, State Minister of Economy, Trade and Industry of Japan. Today, first international GX meeting will be the last meeting of the two-week GX week. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to all parties involved for their great efforts and cooperation in organizing this meeting. More than 140 countries have pledged to be carbon neutral by 2050. Going forward, the concrete actions is ever more important. The world now needs to transform its social systems toward a clean energy-centered emission reductions, and economic growth must be achieved at the same time. We call this green transformation, or GX, and are studying ways to achieve it. Materializing GX faces remaining issues such as a green market and its meaning, assessment methods surrounding climate policies, ideal international corporations, and so forth. Today, we would like to discuss toward global GX materialization through in-depth discussions on the subject. First, I would like to introduce three Japanese policies toward GX. First, by the end of the year, we will formulate 10-year roadmap for GX investment, which aims to realize 1.1 trillion yen in investment through public-private sector cooperation over the next 10 years. Second, we will establish the GX League, a voluntary emissions trading framework for companies with ambitious reduction targets, which will be fully operated by 2023. And we will compile concrete rules and demonstrate ideas for formulate ideas for market demonstration. The third is the promotion of transition finance in the industrial sector, particularly high-emission industries. And through these efforts, we shall strive to attract ESG funds in the area of emission. And particularly what I think is important is that we would like to deepen the discussion on the concept of reduction contribution amount. Currently, the amount of GHG reduction contribution by companies and other entities themselves is not included in the GHG emission reduction, and it is important to continue to accelerate such efforts. And but then it is very important to disseminate the services associated with the GHG emission. For instance, the company disseminates the air conditioning with the heat pumps attached, and sell the product across the world. The contribution from that product sales is not counted as a GHG emission reduction. Therefore, we need to formulate a system to support such corporate and organizational efforts. And there are other activities that the government has to take up on, and we need to identify the companies making the GHG emission reduction contribution, and also we will be able to also assess such efforts through the public procurement, and we need to touch upon the area of evaluation and a fair assessment of the contribution. Lastly, Japan will preside over the G7 next year. While each country has its own position, I hope that the developing and the developed countries will work in unison to promote initiatives that transcend barriers. Japan will promote international cooperation and the world's GX while promoting international cooperation. I would like to thank you for your participation, and with this, I would like to end my opening remark.
Thank you. Now, I would like to welcome Mr. Peter Bakker, President and CEO, World Business Council for Sustainable Development on stage. Mr. Bakker, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, State Minister, for your introduction, and thank you for the invitation to join GGX, the Green Transformation Conference. I was asked to talk a bit about the role of business in the green transformation. The role of business today is often seen as to maximize profit. But we have to ask ourselves, if we look at the challenges that the world is faced today, if that is still the right purpose. We know we have to deal with climate change, with the loss of nature, and with growing inequality. And business has to contribute to the solutions. Climate is obviously the most urgent. If you have seen the recent science on trigger points, we know that 1.5 degrees of warming is the absolute limit that we can allow the world to see happen. And therefore, we need full-fledged system transformation. In normal English, that means we need to change everything. The energy we use, the food we eat, the transport solutions that we look for. And therefore, being here at the Global Green Transformation Conference is a unique opportunity to engage with all of you about what needs to happen. We need to decarbonize industry, agriculture, transport, built environment. All these things need to happen, and business has a vital role to play in that. What is important for business, though, is that we not only talk about the commitments. There are now plenty of companies that have net zero targets, but do they have operating plans behind them? And do we have the metrics to hold them accountable of the progress they're making? And that begins, and I think the State Minister talked about it as well, with having better information. So what can we do to provide better information in companies for decision making? An end-to-end value chain emissions, Scope 3 accounting, but also very important to drive innovation will be the avoided emissions by the solutions that companies will provide. Externally, the information will be used for disclosing the progress that companies make towards investors and financiers. The TCFD summit was held 2 days ago here in Tokyo, and Japanese business is absolutely leading the implementation of that. That eventually will lead to a financial system rewarding companies that innovate faster. And that's what really the role of business is, to find solutions to draw down the emissions that their businesses provide, but also to innovate the solutions that can avoid emissions further down the supply chain and in the use phase. And that's essentially what green transformation is about. It will change the purpose of business away from just maximizing profit to finding profitable solutions for the problems that the people and the planet currently have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bakker. Now, I would like to introduce 5 messages of ministers and heads of international organizations who could not take part live in the conference today. The first message is from His Excellency John Kerry, Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, United States.
Greetings, my friends. I'm sorry that I can't be with you today in Tokyo for this very important gathering, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to send along our best wishes on a successful meeting and to express our keen desire to work closely with Japan and other partners on an ambitious and successful green transformation agenda, including at Japan's G7 next year. Thank you particularly to Minister Nishimura and the Japanese government for convening this conference, and also for your continued leadership and partnership with the United States in tackling the global climate crisis. We're deeply appreciative of Japan's announcement last year, without pushing and prodding, but spontaneously. You announced an ambitious NDC targeting greenhouse gas emission reductions of 46 to 50% by 2030. This was a really strong sign of leadership by Japan, with both of our countries now aligned with a trajectory to keep 1.5 degrees centigrade alive. As we now turn our attention to the implementation efforts and to managing an accelerated energy transition, we all need to turn our attention not only to national targets, but also to the challenge of rapid clean energy deployment, sectoral transformation, and technological innovation. I'm really heartened that Japan's own green transformation agenda is embracing all three of these priorities. And we have opportunities, all of us, to work together in advancing them. Japan and the United States both strongly believe in the power of clean energy, including nuclear power. Not only does the existing nuclear capacity in the United States and Japan form the lion's share of our baseload carbon-free energy, but we also are strong believers in the next generation of nuclear energy technologies, from novel advanced reactor designs to SMRs and beyond. The US, Japan, and a few other like-minded countries can drive forward innovation that can accelerate the replacement of dirty coal in a way that creates quality jobs and enhances energy security for all of us. The investment by JBIC in a leading American SMR developer, NuScale, is evidence of our close cooperation in this area. We should work to drive similar cooperation in other key climate strategies, such as methane abatement and other key energy transition priority technologies, including battery storage and offshore wind, which are going to be critical for countries like Japan that face land availability constraints. Moreover, my friends, Japan and the United States are working together now to advance the First Movers Coalition, or FMC. Through this flagship public-private partnership, companies make purchase commitments that will begin in 2030 for breakthrough low-carbon solutions, sending a demand signal throughout the marketplace that catalyzes the scale-up of these solutions over the critical decade of climate action between now and 2030. The FMC was launched at COP26 in Glasgow, with more than 30 of the largest companies in the world, with hundreds of billions of dollars in purchasing power joining up in the effort. Today, we have more than 55 companies, representing more than 10% of the Fortune Global 2000 stock market value. We cover 6 total sectors: steel, aluminum, shipping, trucking, aviation, and carbon dioxide removal. And altogether, that represents total purchasing commitments by companies of more than $10 billion. It's really interesting, this enterprise. We have big companies like Ford Motor Company and Volvo that have committed that they're going to purchase 10% of the steel that they use to make their cars will be green steel. Maersk, the largest shipping container business in the world, has pledged that the next 8 ships that they buy or lease will be carbon-free. We have Boeing and Delta and United and Salesforce and Apple who've come together to pledge that in all their flight operations, 5% of the fuel that they use is going to be green fuel. So, sustainable aviation fuel. So you get it. You understand that by big companies making decisions to move into these sectors, we will have green steel and we will have sustainable aviation fuel sooner than we might have otherwise, and will open up the opportunity for other companies to do the same. In addition, we are going to launch yet another sector, concrete, at the upcoming COP in Egypt. In the meantime, There is really so much more that we can do together, including at this very conference. So let's work to further define the sectoral strategies that will help bend the emissions curve and scale up zero emissions technologies. And we need to get more companies and more countries to join initiatives such as the First Movers Coalition and thereby make meaningful purchase commitments that scale clean technologies faster. Let's turn our ambition into action and show the world that climate action and energy security are absolutely capable of going hand in hand in order to address simultaneously these challenges. But we need to understand they are also the fundamental key to prosperous economies in the 21st century. So thank you for the privilege of sharing a few thoughts. I look forward to hearing more about the green transformation agenda. And above all, let's accelerate our efforts together.
Thank you, His Excellency Kerry. The second message is from His Excellency Frans Timmermans, Executive Vice President of the European Committee.
Thank you very much, Minister Nishimura, for your warm welcome and trusted partnership. It is a great honor for me to speak at this important event, so thank you for hosting it and for inviting me to address everyone. By now, none of us are strangers to the impact of the climate crisis. This summer again, we've seen unprecedented droughts, heat waves, and wildfires, and we've all been shocked by the devastating flooding in Pakistan. Here in Japan, the sheer force of Super Typhoon Nanmadol and the tragic loss of life it caused were very alarming. It is as if every day Mother Nature is reminding us that the window for action is closing very rapidly. We urgently need to go beyond setting commitments to deliver steep emissions reductions in the next few years. I'm very pleased that the European Union and Japan are strong partners in this endeavour. The EU's own green transformation is well underway. Following Russia's unjustified invasion of Ukraine, we are moving away from fossil fuels even quicker than before. To be more secure in our energy supply, we're saving energy and speeding up the transition to renewables. In parallel, we are continuing our work to reduce emissions by at least 55% this decade. Our so-called Fit for 55 package strengthens climate and energy policy in nearly all economic sectors, from road transport and aviation to industry and the land sector. Thanks to our emissions trading system, the EU has already cut 25% of emissions as compared to 1990. This cap-and-trade system has a proven track record for energy generation and heavy industry, and now we're strengthening the system to reduce emissions even faster. We will also introduce emissions trading for maritime, buildings, and road transport. To avoid that our carbon emissions are pushed into other places, the so-called carbon leakage, we're also establishing a carbon border adjustment mechanism. This will put a price on the carbon content of imported products made with high carbon emissions, such as steel and cement. These are just a few examples of how we are using regulation to steer Europe's transition to net zero. In Japan, you're heading to the same destination, but with a different path. I am therefore eager and curious to see how the planned Green Transformation League will work and what we can learn from you. As it is voluntary, it will be important to keep a close eye on how the approach delivers and maintain the option of regulation if that proves to be necessary. Because time is of the essence. We cannot afford to make mistakes or run into unwanted delays. I think the EU and Japan are very much on the same page in this regard, working closely together in a green alliance. It is a partnership that we value enormously and that will see us cooperate even closer on protecting the environment, restoring biodiversity, promoting the circular economy, and fighting the climate crisis. We're in this crisis together, and we can overcome it together. Arigato.
Thank you, His Excellency Timmermans. The third message is from the Right Honorable Lord Callanan, Parliamentary Under Secretary of State of the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland.
Distinguished colleagues, let me start by thanking very much the Government of Japan and the Minister of Economy, Trade and Industry for organising GGX. It's a great pleasure for me to be speaking with you today and representing my government in the United Kingdom. The events of this year have made it clear that the world needs diversity of supply and the world needs a green transition to boost energy security. An accelerated and ambitious shift to clean energy, such as solar and wind deployment, as well as greater energy efficiency, is clearly the route to climate and energy security and ultimately to long-term prosperity. In the UK, our energy security strategy lays out how we will accelerate away from expensive fossil fuels with prices set by global markets that we cannot control. And by 2030 here in the UK, 95% of our electricity will come from low-carbon sources. By 2035, we aim to have fully decarbonised our electricity system. Furthermore, in addition to that, we are aiming to deliver up to 24 gigawatts of nuclear power by 2050, approximately 3 times more than we have today. We are also doubling our ambition for low-carbon hydrogen production, aiming to reach 10 gigawatts of capacity by 2030, with at least half of this being green hydrogen. Internationally, through our UK COP presidency with our Egyptian partners, we will continue to accelerate the pace of the global clean energy transition. Both the UK and Japan have set very ambitious 2050 net zero goals, which we of course may remain fully committed to. Today, net zero targets now cover 90% of the world's economy, up from about 30% 2 years ago when the UK took on the COP26 presidency. To deliver on these targets, we have to fully harness the full power of collective action in 4 key areas, which were highlighted by the Breakthrough Agenda report. Firstly, on standards. Clear international standards are vital for unlocking growth, trade and investment in green products and technologies for the future. Secondly, in market creation. Governments need to send clear policy signals and agree joint procurement so that businesses have confidence to invest in new technologies, driving down costs in the process. Thirdly, in research, development and demonstration. We must align our efforts to deliver transformational projects, share the lessons globally and turbocharge clean and technology transitions. Fourthly, and most importantly, we must strengthen our collective offers of assistance to the Global South. By aligning, coordinating and reinforcing our assistance efforts, we can ensure that clean technologies are affordable and accessible for all. So I want to invite every country taking part today to develop priority actions across these 4 areas. And the UK looks forward to working with you all to turn clean energy ambition into action. We are very excited to see how this conference shapes Japan's G7 presidency in 2023. We hope that through effective partnerships, including with various government and industry representatives present today, we can all work together to supercharge international efforts on clean growth. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, the Right Honorable Lord Callanan. The fourth message is from His Excellency Matthias Cormann, Secretary General of OECD.
Dear Minister Yasutoshi Nishimura, Excellencies, distinguished guests, friends all. The world urgently needs more ambitious and globally more effective action on climate change. The good news is that over 140 countries around the world have announced or are considering net zero targets, including, of course, Japan. Together, these countries cover 90% of global emissions. But now is the time to move from commitments to actions and from actions to real outcomes. And sadly, efforts to secure the global net zero transition or the green transformation have been made more complex by Russia's unprovoked, unjustifiable and illegal war of aggression against Ukraine. That war has caused cascading impacts on energy prices, global supply chains, and food security. It is important then that as we respond to the short-term pressures this war is causing with short-term measures, that we also remain focused on our structural reform missions. And that, of course, includes our commitment to transition to global net zero emissions. As a truly global problem, emissions don't know any borders. We need truly global solutions to climate change. We need to ensure that measures to reduce emissions from and within individual jurisdictions help to reduce global emissions and don't just shift activity, jobs and emissions from one part of the world to others. For this, we need better, more comparable data and information on the policies that will help drive this transition to net zero, on their progress and outcomes achieved, including in terms of their impacts on people and communities. The OECD has unique strengths here and can support climate action through the Inclusive Forum on Carbon Mitigation Approaches, which we launched in June. That forum seeks to provide comprehensive analysis on policies to address climate change, their comparative effectiveness and costs, and it builds on the OECD's strong track record in providing internationally comparable statistics and measurement frameworks, and in fostering multilateral dialogue, including through the OECD's work with the G7 and the G20. The Inclusive Forum on Carbon Mitigation Approaches envisages the equal footing participation of emitting countries around the world, including OECD countries and major emerging economies. It recognizes that different parts of the world with different starting positions, in different circumstances and with different opportunities to make their best possible contribution towards global efforts to reduce emissions, will use different policy approaches and policy mixes. I'm grateful for the great support that Japan has shown for this initiative. As this conference shows, Japan is ready to play an important part in addressing the challenge of climate change. Japan stands out as one of the most energy-efficient economies among OECD members. This was achieved in part thanks to tightening energy efficiency standards for products, vehicles and housing. These policies will provide a great basis for Japan to lead by example during its upcoming G7 presidency. As a long-standing partner of the G7, the OECD and Japan have already started discussing possible OECD contributions to support the Japanese presidency of the G7 next year. Those contributions will build on our previous G7 inputs, including work on policy frameworks for decarbonization, on financing climate mitigation, adaptation and biodiversity protection, and on reform of environmentally harmful subsidies. We will support Japan in delivering on its priorities all the way up to the Leaders' Summit next year in Hiroshima. And we will continue to support Japan in the transition towards a net zero future and as we go along the path of the increasingly urgent green transformation of our economies. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, His Excellency Common. The last message is from Dr. Fatih Birol, Executive Director of International Energy Agency, interviewed by Mr. Shinichi Kihara from the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry.
Thank you very much, Fatih, for joining us in the first Global GX conference. I recall the excellent experience working in your team in the IEA, and I'm really excited to work closely with you again in this critical time. We are now facing a drastic change in the energy and climate landscape. The world needs to transform its social system to focus on clean energy and achieve both emission reductions and economic growth. In Japan, we call this green transformation or GX. So what is your expectations and views towards realizing global green transformation, particularly in the industry sector?
Thank you very much, Shinichi. It's great to see you again. I have also fond memories working with you. One of the hardest workers I have ever seen in my life. So thank you very much again to be together here. Now, what I believe is, Shinichi, we are in the middle of the first truly global energy crisis. Our world has never, ever witnessed such an energy crisis with this depth and with this complexity. And many governments around the world, however, are responding to this crisis by putting new policies in place. United States, Europe, Japan, India, China, and others. It is very important that this transformation, this response, is going in a direction where you have energy security, climate change, and economic growth objectives are met. But to do that, the key of reaching these objectives would be having investment, mobilize investments. And here I would like to congratulate Japan for having the green transformation initiative here. I was a few days ago, I was in Tokyo. I have congratulated Prime Minister Kishida for having initiated this green transformation of Japan. I hope it will be a source of inspiration for other countries in order to innovate, put the right policies, energy policies in place to have a greener and securer economic growth.
Yes, thank you very much. I totally agree about the need of investment in the right policies. So decarbonizing the industry sector, especially in the hard-to-abate sector, is a common challenge for all. And IEA's report on achieving net zero heavy industry sectors in G7 members proposed a definition of near zero emission materials and sent out an important message towards decarbonizing the hard-to-abate sector. So what is IEA's intention in the further development of discussion on near zero emission materials? And what are the tasks to be done?
Thank you very much for asking this question, because when we talk about decarbonization, many people think basically the electricity generation. It is, of course, important, but in the electricity generation, it is relatively easier because we have renewables, we have nuclear power, we have a lot of options, and it is easier compared to heavy industries where it is you don't have much alternatives. The emissions are much more stubborn when it comes to heavy industries here. So it is the reason the German government in the last G7 asked the IEA to come up with a report how we can achieve net zero heavy industry in the G7 members. And we presented this first in the G7 Energy and Environmental Ministers meeting in Berlin. And then I have also presented this in the Elmau G7 Leaders Summit in Elmau, where Prime Minister Kishida, together with President Biden and the others were there. So we have a couple of suggestions there, if I can share a few of them with you. First of all, we have to have the right definitions. What do we understand from the ambitions? What kind of policies need to be put in place? And what kind of data? Data is very important here. As I said in the IES since years, data always wins. So therefore, in order to have the right policies, we have to see that the governments need to agree on a process for improved data collection and how to be measure and process this data. So if I can summarize, we made a lot of suggestions, but two things are important. First, the definitions, and then the second is the data and how we measure that. And I am really thankful to Japan that in both of these areas, Japan made a big success story. And I very much hope that the G7 presidents of Japan will take this issue forward from the German presidency, as I believe it's a critical issue for all G7 countries, but at the same time for the rest of the world. And the Japanese leadership in this area would be very much appreciated.
Yes, thank you very much for insightful views. Data always wins. This is a very powerful message, and this has been the backbone of the IEA. So we will definitely build on to all your inputs today in our GGX conference. So once again, thank you for your participation and contribution to the GGX conference. I look forward to the continued leading role by the IEA towards the sustainable and secure energy future. Thank you very much, Dr. Fatigue.
Thank you very much. All the best. Thank you very much, Mr. Chiara. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bilo and Mr. Kihara.